My mother clinked her glass and said, "Some grandkids earn their place at this table." Then she glanced at my 9-year-old and smirked. Everyone started laughing except my husband. He clinked his glass and said this. The room suddenly went pale. Christmas at my mother's house always felt more like a silent competition than a holiday. Each year she hosted what she dramatically called the family banquet, where she made passive-aggressive remarks about who was thriving and who was coasting. This year I had a bad feeling walking in. My husband Evan squeezed my hand before we stepped through the front door. Our daughter, Sophie, 9, had spent the last week rehearsing a little Christmas poem she wrote for Grandma. She was so proud of it, had even made a drawing to go with it. She wanted this to be special. I just wanted to survive the night. It didn't take long to see where the night was going. The living room already looked like a furniture showroom. White couches no one was allowed to sit on, fake candles flickering like a Hallmark ad, and a massive tree decorated in silver and gold. Sophie walked in holding her drawing wide-eyed, and my mother barely acknowledged her before rushing over to greet my sister Vanessa, who had just arrived. Vanessa's sons were wearing matching blazers and brought homemade chutney jars with printed labels. My mom acted like they'd descended from heaven. She gushed over them, and when Sophie tried again to hand over her little gift, my mom told her to put it under the tree and save it for later. Dinner was loud. The wine was flowing, and so were the backhanded compliments. My mother started going around the table, catching up on everyone's accomplishments, which always meant pointing out who had done what, and who hadn't. Vanessa's kids won a robotics tournament, her husband got a big promotion, they'd booked a European cruise. She talked about all of it like she was the one achieving it. Then came the toast. Everyone had just gotten their second round of wine. My mother stood up, raised her glass with a theatrical pause and smiled. Some grandkids earn their place at this table. And she glanced directly at Sophie. Then smirked. The laughter wasn't loud, it was worse than that. It was knowing. Nods, chuckles, and little side glances like they were all in on the joke. Vanessa didn't laugh, but she smiled the way she always does when she wants to pretend she didn't hear something awful. One of her sons elbowed the other, and I saw Sophie slowly look down at her plate. I couldn't move. My throat went dry. I looked at Evan. He reached for his glass and tapped it once. Well, some adults earn their place in our lives. Silence. It was like someone flipped a switch. My aunt looked down at her lap. Vanessa stiffened. My father just blinked at his plate like he'd forgotten how to eat. Then Evan stood up. He looked at me, then at Sophie, and told us it was time to go. That's it? My mom said. You're leaving? Over that. We didn't answer. I helped Sophie into her coat. Her drawing was still folded in her lap, untouched. I grabbed it and tucked it into my bag. We walked toward the door, and I heard my mom mutter something under her breath about how we were always sensitive and how maybe that's why Sophie struggled. Then came the yelling. You don't walk out on your family on Christmas. Don't be ridiculous. Evan opened the front door and let the cold air in. It was already snowing. As we walked to the car, we heard the door open again. My mother had followed us out barefoot, standing in the snow with her arms crossed. You're not going to cut us off over a harmless comment. Grow up. She looked around like someone might be watching. We didn't even turn around. Evan opened the car, got Sophie in, then came around for me. As we drove off, I looked in the side mirror. She was still standing there, arms wrapped around herself now, like she wasn't sure what had just happened. We drove home in silence. Sophie eventually fell asleep in the back seat. I took her drawing out of my bag when we got home. It was a simple Christmas tree with stick figures of her, me, and Evan, smiling. Above it she'd written, "My favorite people." That was the last Christmas we spent at my mother's house. But it wasn't the end. Not even close. The silence didn't last long. We hadn't even unpacked our overnight bags when the calls started. My mom, my dad, Vanessa. One after the other. First it was voicemails laced with fake concern, hoping we got home safe, hoping Sophie was okay. Then came the guilt. Then the passive-aggressive messages. My sister finally just sent a text that said, "So you're proud of yourselves? Hope it was worth the drama." I didn't reply to any of it. But Evan was already a few steps ahead. 2 days after Christmas, while most people were still relaxing in pajamas or returning gifts, he scheduled an emergency board meeting at the office. No warning, no agenda, just a single line. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions. My parents arrived, clueless. My dad looked confused but relaxed, probably assuming it was about end-of-year taxes. My mom wore a blazer like she thought she'd be giving advice. Vanessa tagged along again, even though she has no stake in the business. She just likes being present for things that aren't hers. We sat in the conference room. Evan handed out documents to each of them, page after page of legal language. It was a formal buyout agreement. We were removing both of them from the company. Effective immediately. No negotiation. My dad skimmed the pages like it was a prank. My mom didn't touch hers at all. Just stared across the table. Evan told them flatly. The way they treated Sophie was cruel, childish, and telling. And if that's how they saw their own granddaughter, like a punchline, then they had no business being part of something we built for her future. My father tried to keep calm. Said it was a personal matter, and had nothing to do with the company. Evan disagreed. He said the business is part of our family legacy. And people who humiliate a child in front of a room full of relatives don't get to benefit from that legacy anymore. My mom finally broke her silence and asked if this was about one comment. She leaned into the idea that we were overreacting, that it was a misunderstanding. Then she had the nerve to say she didn't mean it that way. Evan didn't even look at her when he said, "You meant it exactly that way." They started getting louder. My dad questioned the legality. My mom warned this could affect our public image. Vanessa tried to interrupt and talk over us, like she was the voice of reason. She called it a family disagreement. He said we were acting like children. Then Evan stood up. He said the paperwork had already been filed. That the lawyers were informed and their exit was happening whether they liked it or not. They could sign now and leave with dignity, or they could let the lawyers handle it the hard way. My dad stood up furious, called it betrayal. My mom refused to move. Vanessa started in with her usual smug attitude, said we'd lost perspective and were dragging Sophie into adult problems. That's when Evan told them if they weren't out of the building in 2 minutes, he'd have the front desk call security. No one expected that. Not from Evan. Definitely not in that cold, steady tone. But he meant it. They left. My mother slammed the door. My dad muttered something about how we'd need them one day. Vanessa called us delusional as she followed them out, still trying to sound superior. The silence after they left was incredible. We went home and Sophie was on the floor surrounded by Legos, building a castle. She looked up, asked if we could have pancakes for dinner. Evan smiled and said absolutely. Her drawing was still on the fridge. The one she made for my mom, who never even looked at it. I stood in the kitchen for a long time that night just staring at it. That meeting changed everything. But not just for them. For us too. For a few weeks we lived in a strange kind of peace. No calls. No emails. No unexpected knocks at the door. It was like they'd all gone underground, regrouping. At first I thought maybe, just maybe, they were taking it seriously, maybe even reflecting. Evan didn't think so. He said it felt too much like a storm that had dipped below the radar but hadn't disappeared. He was right. It started subtly. A distant cousin posted family photos from a birthday party we hadn't even known about. Everyone was there. My parents, Vanessa, the cousins, their kids. Sophie wasn't invited. I recognized the tablecloth and decorations because they were the exact ones I used for Sophie's last birthday. My mom had copied everything down to the balloon arch. The caption said, "Family means showing up." That night, Sophie asked if she'd done something wrong. I told her no. But it was hard to explain why people she called aunt and uncle 1 month ago now acted like she didn't exist. 2 weeks later, Evan's phone buzzed during dinner. It was a message from an old business partner. "Did your father-in-law really try to present himself as still being on your board at the Rotary meeting?" Apparently, my dad had started hinting to people that he was still involved in an advisory way. Evan didn't respond to the message, but I could see him quietly fuming as he helped Sophie with her broccoli. That was the last straw for him. He contacted our legal team and made it official. Any representation of involvement in our business, past or present, was now legally restricted. We sent the paperwork out. They had 48 hours to sign or face litigation. Evan didn't want to drag it out, but he wasn't going to let them rewrite the story either. Then Vanessa showed up. It was a Saturday morning. Evan and I were folding laundry in the living room. Sophie was upstairs, drawing in her room. The doorbell rang, and when Evan opened it, she walked right in without waiting to be invited. That used to be normal. Not anymore. She didn't even say hello. He launched straight in. She said our parents were struggling, that dad was humiliated, that mom had cried herself to sleep every night. She made it sound like we'd taken away their lifeline. Then she pivoted, told us we were raising Sophie in a bubble, that she needed her extended family. She used words like toxic, abandonment, emotional damage. Then she made a mistake. She turned to Evan and said, "Let's be real. This is about your pride. You've always had a chip on your shoulder about where you came from." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Evan calmly told her this was her last time stepping foot in our house. He said if she ever showed up again even to talk, we'd treat it like trespassing. She laughed at first. Thought he was bluffing. Said, "You're seriously going to call the police on your wife's sister?" He didn't repeat himself. Just opened the front door and stood there. Waiting. She left. But she didn't go quietly. Her last words before the door shut were, "This family is going to turn its back on you, one by one." And she wasn't wrong about that. Over the next few months, the invitations stopped coming. Birthday parties, baby showers, holiday dinners. Our names were scrubbed from group texts. Sophie wasn't mentioned in posts anymore. One of the younger cousins unfollowed me on Instagram. Another blocked Evan. My mother had started telling people we walked away from the family. My dad spun a version where Evan was a controlling man who isolated me. Vanessa just ran her mouth to anyone who'd listen. None of it mattered, because we had something they never did. We were honest with each other. We didn't pretend. We didn't sugarcoat cruel jokes and call them tradition. We didn't put down a child for not winning a medal or learning piano fast enough. We didn't rank people at the dinner table. Still it stung. Especially for Sophie. When Easter came and went without even a phone call, she asked me if Grandma was mad at her. I told her the truth. No, sweetheart. Grandma just doesn't know how to love people who aren't perfect in her eyes. Sophie nodded and said that's okay. I don't need her to love me. You and Daddy do. I hugged her longer than usual that night. By summer my parents had adjusted. My dad found some work consulting with an old college friend. My mom launched some ridiculous online store. Imported home goods she claimed were artisan, but I knew she bought them wholesale. They weren't hurting. In fact, once they found their footing again, they acted like they'd never needed us to begin with. And the more stable they got, the more obvious it became. They didn't miss us. They didn't want us back. They wanted to win. And when they couldn't win by pulling us back in, they tried a new tactic. Erasing us altogether. Summer ended without a single word from anyone in my family. By the time the leaves started turning, it was clear we'd been completely cut out. No Halloween invite. No Thanksgiving plans. Not even a passive-aggressive Christmas newsletter like my mom used to send every year, where she'd mention Vanessa's kids' GPA and conveniently forget Sophie existed. We were ghosts. And honestly, I had started to feel okay with that. Sophie was thriving in school, Evan and I were stronger than ever, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waking up every morning bracing for another emotional landmine from someone with my blood. Then out of nowhere my brother showed up. Jake was the only one in the family who never really took sides. He was the youngest, 7 years younger than me, and had always been treated like a background character. Quiet, agreeable, always flying under the radar. He lived in Portland, kept to himself, and never showed up for family drama. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago at a wedding, and we barely said more than 10 words to each other. But suddenly there he was, on our front porch in late November, holding a backpack and a cup of gas station coffee, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He said he needed to talk. Said he didn't want to get involved before, but things had changed. Evan was cautious but let him in. Sophie was at a sleepover, which was probably for the best. Jake sat at our kitchen table and said straight out that Vanessa was trying to sue us. I laughed at first. Thought it was a joke. He shook his head. Said she'd been talking to a lawyer about emotional distress. How our decision to cut off the family had damaged reputations and caused psychological harm, particularly to the elderly parents she'd been caring for. She was framing it like we'd created a hostile environment, and from what Jake overheard, she had convinced my parents to consider backing it with statements. Not because they wanted to, he said, but because Vanessa made them believe it was the only way to wake us up. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at Evan and he looked back at me like he already knew this was coming. Like he had been waiting for the family to finally turn from passive-aggressive smears to full-on sabotage. Jake stayed the night. We didn't ask why. We knew. The next morning, he admitted he wasn't just there to warn us. He wanted out too. Said Vanessa had moved into our parents' guest house after getting laid off. That she was using their accounts to fund her lifestyle, claiming it was caretaker compensation. Said she'd been whispering poison into their ears every day, rewriting history, turning every kindness Evan ever showed into some controlling scheme. And the kicker? Vanessa had already started sending emails to some of our clients, introducing herself as a family representative for the company, offering discounted rates and saying Evan was planning to scale down and retire soon. That's when Evan finally snapped. He got our lawyer on the phone within the hour, had cease and desist letters drafted that same day, and flagged Vanessa's name with our partners. We sent warnings to every client she contacted and attached legal documentation making it clear she had no affiliation, no standing, and if she reached out again she'd be facing court. That night we got a string of voicemails from my mom. Not angry. Desperate. Begging us to be reasonable. Telling me Vanessa didn't mean any harm. Asking me if I really wanted to be the reason the family fell apart. I didn't respond. Jake stayed with us for the rest of the week. On the last night, as we sat around the fire pit in the backyard, he said something I hadn't expected. He said, I used to think you were the angry one. The dramatic one. But now I see you were just the only one who told the truth. I didn't know what to say to that. The next day he left for a cabin he'd rented in Colorado. Said he wanted to start fresh. Said he was done with pretending. And with that, the last thread connecting us to my old family was cut. Or so I thought. Because I hadn't heard from Vanessa in over a month. Which meant she wasn't finished. He was planning something. December came fast. No cards, no calls, no signs of Christmas. I should have been relieved. But the quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like pressure building somewhere out of sight, like something was about to blow. Vanessa hadn't resurfaced since the cease and desist letters. Her email silence, her social media blackout, all of it felt too strategic. He was planning something. I knew it. Evan knew it too, but he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he focused on tightening the company's security, digital and legal, while I started looking into homeschooling options for Sophie, just in case we needed to disappear for a bit. Then the storm hit. It came in the form of a formal event. A charity gala my mother had helped organize every December since I was a teenager. Normally we wouldn't have cared, but one of our clients, one of our biggest, was a major sponsor this year. We were invited through the company, not the family. Evan hesitated, but we both agreed we had to go, at least to maintain the relationship. We walked into the ballroom like ghosts returning to haunt the living. My mother was there in a silver gown, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny. My father stood stiff by the bar, clearly out of place without a boardroom to hide behind. And then there was Vanessa right near the entrance. She wore a red dress that didn't fit her. Too tight, too bold, too obviously meant to be a statement. She made eye contact with me immediately, then looked at Evan and smiled. But it wasn't a smile. It was a warning. We didn't approach her. We didn't speak to anyone except our client and his wife. It was a short, polite conversation. Professional. On the surface, everything looked fine. Until later that night, when our client pulled Evan aside and quietly asked about the rumors. Apparently, Vanessa had been telling people Evan was stepping away from the company because of health issues. That he was planning to sell. That we were going through financial trouble. She had said with just enough vagueness to sound credible, that the family was concerned. Evan laughed in disbelief. Then he corrected everything, clearly, calmly, professionally. That was the last time we ever got invited to one of those galas. But it didn't end there. In January, my parents sold the house. The one where Sophie was born. The one where Evan built the deck. The one where my mother once made me promise I'd host Thanksgiving someday. They moved into a townhouse half the size across the city, in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew their name. My dad picked up more consulting work to pay the bills. My mom started giving online decor tips to retirees on Facebook. The business money was gone. The reputation was unraveling. Vanessa's schemes had caught up with her. The clients she tried to poach reported her. The lawyer she'd bragged about ghosted her. And her last desperate move, a GoFundMe for a wronged family in crisis, was flagged and taken down within 72 hours. But none of that stopped her from trying to lecture me one last time. She showed up at my office. She didn't ask. She barged in and told the receptionist she was my sister. When she found me in the hallway, she looked furious. She started talking immediately. Said I was destroying the family. Said Evan had turned me against everyone. Said Sophie was going to grow up cold and miserable. He called me selfish, vengeful, dramatic. And then she said this. They're still your parents, Abby. One day you're going to wake up and realize you ruined everything over nothing. Evan came out of his office at that exact moment. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just pointed to the door and told her to leave. She tried to stand her ground, said she wasn't finished. He said next time the police would be involved. She froze. Looked at both of us like she didn't recognize who we were anymore. Then she walked out. That was the last time we saw her. I heard from someone a few weeks later that she'd moved in with a friend, still insisting she'd been betrayed. My parents didn't speak about her publicly anymore. They had bigger problems. But in a strange twist, once their lives started improving again, when my dad finally got a steady consulting contract, when my mom started getting little interviews on local blogs, they started treating us like we didn't exist at all. No more jabs. No more accusations. We were simply erased. They stopped inviting us to every family gathering. No calls for birthdays. No cards on holidays. No acknowledgement of Sophie's school awards or Evan's new contract, or the new house we bought in a better school district. It was like we were never born. But I didn't grieve it. Because I finally understood something. They hadn't cut us out to protect themselves. They did it because they couldn't stand that we walked away first. And that we never came back. It's been almost a full year now. No contact. No more messages. No more ambushes at work or charity events. Just silence. Not peaceful, not painful. Just hollow, like the echo left in a room long after everyone's gone. They never reached out on Sophie's birthday. That was the last test, the one I didn't realize I was still hoping they'd pass. She turned 10 this spring. Double digits. We threw her a backyard party with her closest friends. She made her own cake. Chocolate with strawberry filling. She beamed through the whole day. And that night while I was cleaning up I noticed something. She didn't mention my mom once. Not when she opened gifts. Not when she blew out candles. Not even when she got tired and curled up on the couch with her blanket. She hadn't asked why grandma wasn't there. She didn't need her to be. I think that's when I really let go. Evan had let go long before me. He'd said from the start that blood doesn't excuse cruelty. That family isn't defined by who shows up to hurt you and expects you to thank them for it. But I held on longer. Maybe because I was raised to think forgiveness was automatic even if it wasn't earned. Or maybe because I still believed that if I did everything right, they'd become the people I needed them to be. But people don't change just because you wish they would. And they don't love better just because you keep giving them opportunities to. By the end of summer they stopped even pretending we existed. They hosted a reunion in early August. Every cousin, every second cousin, everyone who ever mattered to them. We found out about it from someone who didn't realize we hadn't been invited. The caption under the group photo read, "The ones who always stick together." And you know what? That didn't sting like I thought it would. It felt freeing. Like the weight of pretending had finally been lifted. We still hear things sometimes. Whispers from people who know them. My dad has become the go-to guy for semi-retired consultants. My mom launched some mentorship circle for women over 50. They act like nothing ever happened. Vanessa, last I heard, moved out of state. She sent Jake a cryptic email about starting over, but he never answered. I never got an apology. Not from any of them. Not once. But I got something better. I got peace. Our home is calm now. No tiptoeing, no walking on eggshells. No dodging barbed compliments or fake smiles. Sophie has grown into herself without needing to perform. Evan and I laugh more. We sleep better. We argue less. Not because life is perfect, but because we don't spend our days being drained by people who think love is conditional. I've learned that losing family doesn't always look like death or distance. Sometimes it's just finally being honest about the kind of love you never really received in the first place. They erased us from their story, so we wrote our own. And when I look at Sophie now, strong, bright, creative, unafraid, I realize we didn't just walk away from something broken. We built something better. And they'll never get to touch it.